Welcome, warriors. To say that this week's guest has been through a lot would be an understatement. But reveals, as she reveals in our conversation, it was a lot of little things and not so little things that compounded in a way I think many of us can relate to. So grab a tissue and get ready to hear a poet and storyteller as she shares her stories of struggle and loss and the faith that was an important part of it all. Let's rock.
Does your past haunt you? Maybe you're in a storm that feels like it will never end. Are you fighting a battle that's rendering you hopeless? Maybe you feel like you're fighting alone, but your battle was not meant to be a solo endeavor. You were meant to be a warrior among warriors. My name is Heather, and I grew up thinking my battles were nobody's business until I found myself in an abusive marriage and felt cut off from all avenues of help. In this podcast, you will hear warriors' words. They will tell you of their battles, both won and lost, their journeys, and their lessons learned along the way. But we don't stop there. These warriors will share how they have applied those lessons to go from warrior to survivor to thriver. Whether it's an abusive marriage, illness, mental health crisis, or any number of traumas this world dishes out, these warriors will use their words to help you find the beauty in your broken, move beyond your battles, and become the thriver God created you to be. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words.
Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. Our guest today is Tanya Harris Roundy. She is first and foremost a wife, mother, and grandmother. Born and mostly raised in Utah with a few stints in California, she has a master's in education from Utah State University and a BS degree in English literature from Utah Valley University. She engages students in learning English, theater, and speech and debate. While directing plays is her addiction, she calls it therapy. She also loves to write, act, sing, play the piano, write songs, be involved with her church, and in genealogy. Her faith sustains her through everything she does, and she prays to always be an influence for good in the world. Now, before we hear from Tanya, here is a review from Horrible Math Person. Great podcast for those wanting to find hope and beauty in the hard times. Thank you very much. And I absolutely love that name. And I really do appreciate your kind words. Would you like me to read your review on an upcoming episode of the Warrior Words podcast? Please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review for the show. Your comments and your star ratings help people find us, and it only takes a few minutes of your time. The Warrior Words Facebook community is open. Please come join us for inspirational stories, lessons learned, and beauty bombs. And if you want to know what a beauty bomb is, come and join us to find out. Just go to facebook.com/groups/warrior words and hit the request to join button. A couple questions will pop up after that. So you answer those and hit, I guess it's send, enter. I don't remember what it is, but I look forward to having you in the group and engaging with you and getting to know you better there. So now on to the show. Hi, everyone. As you heard in the intro, we are blessed to have Tanya Harris Roundy here with us today. Welcome to the Warrior Words podcast, Tanya.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. So when we first started dialoguing about this, you were telling me that you had some experiences of bullying in your teenage years, and that seems to be something that a lot of us can relate to.
Oh yeah, it's thing.
So can you share with us what the circumstances were around your bullying experience and maybe how you handled that?
Yeah, so growing up, we moved from one town in northern Salt Lake to a very small town in Utah. And when you've grown up in a small town and someone else moves in, they don't fit in, and it's often hard to let them in, and especially when they're kids. I mean, I was in sixth grade. Our family bought this nice little place out in the middle of nowhere, and I had been advanced in all my things, and so I get into this small town, and all of a sudden I'm having to do things alone because the math and the assignments, and kids don't like to acknowledge that other kids can be smarter and advanced and doing things different than everyone else. And you're new in town. You don't know everyone's family history, and
Mm.
you aren't related to everyone, and you haven't been to every family reunion, and you don't know all the traditions and culture of that community. And
Mhm.
it got to be a struggle at times when you're playing at recess alone
Yeah.
and you don't have a lot of communication with other people. And um, we had to go from one school, the elementary school, up to the 7th through 12 high school up the road for band. And
Okay.
so I walked out a couple of times, and kids would shove me
Mm.
and harass me, shut me down, things like this. I was blessed to have someone who I didn't wasn't friends with at the time, but she noticed and went and told the principal. And when you're bullied, you don't want other people to know. You don't want to get them in trouble
Right.
because that makes it worse. And so the physical stopped, but almost worse than the physical is when you're ignored.
Mm.
And so they leave you alone, very alone. and and then you don't have anyone. And so that was hard. I, as the oldest of 9 kids, as our family, you know, it was my mom had stayed up in Salt Lake with some of the kids while she was selling the house, and I was there with my dad and my brothers, and he's teaching, and they've got their things. And so, you feel alone sometimes, and that made it really, really hard to not tell anyone, not to want to tell anyone. When you're 12, you're 11, 12
Right.
years old. You don't know how to deal with those things. You don't know why people are doing that. Um, so music became a lot of my things. I'd already been playing the piano, and so I dove into music, playing the instruments and things like this. I did get blessed that a couple of kids finally kind of took me under their wing, but that took a couple of years. I
Mhm.
joined theater and speech and debate. I had a couple of really good teachers who pulled me in to those communities, but even then it was very difficult because you're still the outside person, and
Right.
they've got their cliques and their things. My parents didn't want me to do theater because theater has that reputation.
Yes, I know that well. I know that well.
And so they didn't want me being involved with those things, so that kind of I could go do plays and things, but I couldn't go and hang out with the kids, and I couldn't do. And so there was still that kind of wall in between things and stuff. And so my self-esteem really suffered a lot throughout those years. And the other thing that happened is I was diagnosed with scoliosis in my back. And so by the time they found it, it was already so bad that they were like, okay, it's either surgery or a back brace. So we went with a back brace to see if we could stop it first. So from my chest all the way down to my hips, I'm in this plastic case, and kids would go
Yeah.
around and knock on it
Hmm.
and
I
shove you
did that
around.
too. I did that
Yeah.
too. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and you're like, and of course you can't control where you're going because now your body is being shoved, and
Hmm.
or you take it off during PE in the locker rooms back when they still made you change and have things in the locker rooms. And so all of a sudden I'd come in and find my back brace missing, or hidden someplace. And and you're already feeling that, and now your body's feeling it, and your body I mean, it's just one thing after the other, right? We go to girls camp. Church should be a safe place. My bullies were at church, so you're going to young women's, you're going into Sunday school, and it's so hard because they're talking about all these things about being good people, and they're acting so pious, but
Right.
the snickering and the gossip, and it was hard to go to church. And it wasn't just me either. So my brothers and sisters were facing the same things as they went. My mom actually faced it when we were and stuff like this, and that made it hard, to go to church, to face those things. Um, a lot of anxiety built up because of that, and self-esteem for many of us facing it in different ways,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So theater became my thing. As I got older, even more so, mom and dad figured out, hey, let her do it. And I got some really good friends. And there were some good kids of us in there that kind of changed the culture of the theater in our school. So it wasn't that kind of culture that we've seen in the past. And
Mhm.
so I got to know them, and then poetry and writing became my thing. I had a really good teacher, Mr. Johnson, who got me writing, and he was also the theater teacher. And I started writing poetry, and short stories, and my journals became venting. But it became my therapy, and a way to
Yeah.
get it out and in a
Mhm.
healthier way. Um, and that became a lot of my coping mechanism. My parents found it a while later, and they started reading my journals and my
Oh
things. I'm like,
no.
oh no, we need therapy. And I was, yeah, I mean, the things I was drawing and talking about weren't exactly happy-go-lucky things,
Well, yeah, not when
obviously.
you're bullied and you're alone and yeah, exactly.
I mean, they were pretty dark things, and I will admit that there were times when ending my life had the thoughts crossed my mind. Never serious, never like I
Mhm.
was made a plan or anything, but the wish to not exist was there sometimes. Not, not I want to go out and kill myself. It was just, man, would anyone notice? Would
Oh
anyone
yeah.
even,
Mhm.
miss me? Would anyone care? Those are the types of things that, as a teenager, and sometimes still even now as adults, that we can go through and feel. So
Yeah.
I dealt with those. Mom and dad took me to therapy once. I talked to the therapist. I said, I do this. They said, that's pretty healthy. And they said you don't need to come back. So I was like, okay,
That was
um,
great therapy.
great therapy. I'm dealing with it in a positive way, I guess. All right. Um, when I go back and read my poetry and my stuff for that time, I'm like, okay, I can see why my parents were, a little concerned.
Concerned. Good word.
Because
Yes.
if I I've had children now, and now I go back and when I see that, I'm like, okay, yeah, my children are writing or saying the same things. How can I deal with this in a better way? And that's a lot of it that I think that helps me with, is that my kids went through a lot of the same things. They didn't want to hear it from me. You don't
Right.
understand, Mom. I'm like, but I do.
Yeah.
you know, I
Yeah.
really do. But at least I knew how to help and what to look for, and to try and help when I could. And as a teacher, I look for those same kinds of things still nowadays. Where do I see those kids? Where do I see what other people are saying? And I can stop the bullies in the first place. I can recognize those things, and
Mm.
then see that kid that, is walking down the hall, not looking at anyone, that's sitting alone at lunch. And can I be there, and can I help them and help them find positive ways to do, and try to be what my teachers were for me, and those people who stepped up for me and help them and stuff like that. But writing and music and theater became those coping mechanisms, still are, still the way I deal with things in a lot of ways, and stuff like that. So,
Well, I love
but
that. I love that you
yeah.
brought up your teacher, Mr. Johnson,
Hmm.
and because I think we all need teachers like that, and some of us are really blessed to have those teachers in our lives. And then now, because you had that experience combined with your bullying experience, you are able to be that teacher for someone
Try.
else.
I hope so. That's what every day before I go to school, I'm always praying, who can I help? Let me know who I need to reach out. Help me find, it's not just as much about teaching as just connecting and making sure those kids are taken care of. It's become a thing. Yeah. So,
Well, then I'm glad. I'm sure, I taught for about 3 years and I taught fourth grade. So I taught a little younger than where you are now.
yeah.
Um, but you always it's one of those, sometimes it's a thankful job. You get the Christmas ornaments and the mugs every year at Christmas time
Right.
um and they say thank you. But then, you really wonder who you may touch, and you may just never know this side of heaven who you have touched with just being there one day. um you know
Exactly. And I think that's the hardest part sometimes, is you feel like you're not making a difference.
mhm.
And there's been years, and I'm already feeling this way this year, is like, am I even making a difference? Am I doing anything this way? But, you know, when you hear a few years later, or you've reconnected on Facebook with some of my students now that I'm 18 years out and they've got their own kids,
Yeah.
and I've been able to see the adult side. It's like you never knew that little one thing that you do that makes a difference. And
Mhm.
so I keep trying to do it, recognizing that it's going to be 10, 20 years or more, or never know, but it will make that difference. And I just have to keep reminding myself, yeah, we make that difference, and just keep going, just keep doing it.
Yeah. Every day, one day at a time, but every one day. Yep.
One breath at a time is
Some days it's exactly what it is.
it is like, okay, just here we go. Okay. So, yep.
So you also mentioned writing, and I happen to know that you've written a book, and the first book has to do more with occurrences that happened later in life. So can we fast forward a little bit then to your adult life and some of the maybe more traumatic experiences that happened as an adult? Because we know that it just doesn't, you don't just figure it all out in high school or college and then everything is grand.
Oh no. Yeah. No, it's like life just keeps going.
That it does.
The certainties that I found though in as a teenager, finding that strength in my testimony then though is what's gotten me through it, and doesn't and so I have to credit a lot of that to being a teenager as well. But yeah,
Mhm.
no, so we got married, had complicated pregnancies, very sick a lot. We had friends who lost a baby like only a few hours after birth, some
Mhm.
severe complications and malformations. Our oldest son was born with a heart condition. So we're finding out, when he's born, all of a sudden, okay, now he's going to be down at primaries within 2 weeks, having tests, having things. I mean, he's not even a few weeks old. He's so tiny, and he's already in doing all these tests. A family member, their son at the same time, or about a year later, comes up with the same kinds of heart conditions, but more complications. So here our son is surviving and doing okay, and we're able to keep going and stuff. And then we lose that nephew and our cousin. And for the same kinds of things, we're in primaries in and out. And then all of a sudden he's 3 years old and we're like, okay, now it's open heart surgery.
Oh,
And
wow. At three, wow.
at 3 years
Yeah.
old, and we also had a friend who we were living in the same apartment complex at college. They got married just a little bit after us, and all of a sudden he wakes up and she had died in her sleep, and she's only
Jeez.
18 years
Yeah.
old. So a lot of losses started coming up, especially after I got married, and friends and their babies, and luckily our children had been more relatively healthy other than that and stuff. But um, we moved to St. George, and I was working in a NICU, and I started writing, working for a writer's online thing, and then someone says, "Write your novel." I'm like, okay. I've been writing all these poetry, I've been writing these short stories. Let's do this. And they gave me the word certainty. And I'm like, what are those certainties? All these things have been going on in our lives and all these losses. How do people get through it without it? I don't know how people can get through without having something to hold on to. And without that, I mean, I was still yelling at God a lot. I was still, why did you let me go through all these things? Why would we suffer all these things? Why are my friends losing their children or their spouses so young? You know, but I at least knew and had that foundation that he was there and I could turn to him, and that there was something that was guiding all this, even if I didn't understand it. So I started writing from that, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. Graveyard shifts in a NICU are great, but I'm seeing a lot of babies again. I'm still in this place where, people are having miscarriages, and I'm helping to take handprints and footprints of little tiny ones, wrapping them up and dressing them so their parents can hold them for the last time. And I got pregnant again, surprise. And we felt like it was twins, because I was so sick and I was getting so big so fast. And for those who are LDS, my husband gave me a blessing, and we knew that it was twins. It's like these spirits within you, um, and blessed, not for a good pregnancy, not that I'll be better or anything, just that these spirits will, are praising you and grateful that you're willing to take them. And I'm like, okay. Um, and a few weeks later, we were at my grandfather's retirement party, and we were visiting some friends in San Diego while we were there. And all of a sudden, I wake up and I'm bleeding, and we're rushing into the hospital, and I'm having pain. And we only see one baby with one heartbeat and a huge pocket of blood above that. And they're saying you're having a miscarriage, and the likelihood is you're going to lose and everything. And but yet I'm supposed to go to a party the next day and hang out with my family. And I mean, it was just so hard, and I didn't know how to handle it. Um, and my dad gave me another blessing that next day because my husband was just like, I can't even right now because he's also going through this
Right.
loss.
Right.
And it was just that we still weren't blessed that this baby would come to us. It was, she will get to choose. So this entire pregnancy, I'm on bed rest. I have 5 other children. I'm all these things, and I still don't know if she's going to choose to stay or not, this spirit. Luckily, she did. And now she's married and all the, and doing all these things. She's had a rough one, and she's had her rough life and of being bullied. And I mean, it's just, this cyclical thing, but it was a hard time. I put down my book at that point. I couldn't
Yeah.
write
That
anymore
makes
on that.
that makes sense. Yes.
Right. And so then 18, 20 years later, all of a sudden I'm invited up to one of Richard Paul Evans' workshops, and I'm inspired. I need to pick this book back up again. I picked it up a few times over the time, and guess what? The child that I killed off in this book was the same name as the daughter who barely made it in my life.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm like, I'm picking it up, putting it down, picking it up, putting it down. It's not happening. I've thought about changing her name. Nope, it's her name. The character's like, no, you can't rename me. So I'm like, well, fine, then you're not getting written right now. So it took time for me to be able to get through a lot of these things. And in the meantime, more friends are losing children. I've had students who've been lost to suicide and accidents, and it just, all of these things throughout that we face. I mean, there's so many people that face so much worse, but
Yeah.
it makes it
That's right.
hard to go
Yeah.
through those things and stuff. So I finally get this book. I finish it in the last couple of years, and my goal, my hope is that people can read it and go, okay, everyone's going through a varying level of trauma and loss in their life, but what can we hold on to get us through that and help us through, and those, no matter how small or big. I mean,
Mhm.
just because you're not having a huge loss, you're not losing a baby, but your child is going through something, you're going through something.
Yes.
And even if it's not huge to anyone else, it's big for you, and it's
Yes, it
your
is.
trial can feel like that huge loss.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I hope that this has actually been very therapeutic for me to get through and to deal with a lot
Mhm.
of those things and remember my own faith and re-ground me back in to what I remember and my testimony and my faith to get through things as I keep facing them, and we keep doing it. But
Right. And I love that
yeah,
though, because in a recent episode, I acknowledged that there were some really big stories that I've had guests on to share recently, and they're huge. And not everybody goes through the huge traumas, but they go through lots of lesser is not the right word, less intense.
hmm
Less intense traumas, but maybe they have more of them. Or maybe, like you said, at that moment, that loss is huge.
yeah,
And then, especially when you have multiples, when you have
hmm
yourself and your friends and your relatives, and it just keeps happening. It compounds.
hmm
So,
and it can feel very overwhelming
mhm.
and and it's exhausting sometimes too. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And I'm glad that you also brought up because I know the title of your book is Certainty, that you went with that word that you were given when you started writing
it
it.
was it. Yeah,
And what you said, just it was, I mean, I guess it was kind of like a light bulb to me. It's like you're writing about the certainties or how somebody gets through things without knowing what those certainties are or having any certainties in their own life. And then when did you put your book down? When you had some uncertainty in your own life.
hmm And
And
it
I just,
wasn't
that
until
was
I
just,
got back to it. Yeah.
yeah, that connection just came to me as you said that. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah, I lost that certainty for a while, and being able to get through it, and had to go back to it, and here's the thing, going back to it also helped me to gain that certainty again too. So I needed both.
Yeah.
I needed both the time to get it back and also the book to help me as well. So yeah.
So that's one of the things that I like to ask people about is, how you're thriving today. And, having that book and having that book go through stages. I think what did you say, like 18 to 20 years from start to
hmm
finish?
Yeah.
Um, it's like that, it sounds like it has been cathartic and healing and just, and that's just for you.
hmm
And then now you're able to, we've talked a lot about pregnancies and children. And so you're able to birth this book baby, and be that for someone else.
I hope so. Yeah, I've had a few of my friends, some of the ones who had lost, and one just recently, he actually just finished it, and he's like, this is hard to get through, and I'm like, he's like, but it's good. I needed this,
Mhm.
and it was like, okay, good. If I even helped one person
Yeah.
who needed it, to me, that's worth it, right? Because that's what it's meant for, is to help those people and do and it, just like any other baby, it's going through its trials and it's going through its struggles as well. But you hope the best for it, and you hope that it can do some good in the world, just like anything else. And that's what I hope, is that someone can take it and use it for good. So yeah,
And if I remember when I read the description, it's fiction. The book
it
itself
is.
is fiction. So it's
Yes,
not specific to you and your family, but it is in a sense your
based
story.
on.
It's,
So yeah, yeah, oh, very much, yeah, and the feelings and the emotions are real, because those things that I was going through all of these different things, or what my friends were going through. But I fictionalized the experiences and drew on things and mixed them, or did and delved. I've had people read that and honestly think that I had gone through this and that it was my story, because
yeah.
but it is fictionalized, which sometimes actually is good, because when we know it's too real, sometimes it's harder. But
Mhm.
if it's fictionalized, we can connect to it in a way without feeling taken out of it too much, because it's not. But it is based on real experiences of people I've known, or things I've gone through, just put in a way that's maybe a little easier to handle. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think so too, because that's I've mentioned it before. I have my manuscript, which is sitting in a PDF file for now. I've fictionalized some of it too, and I think that sometimes it does help to get a distance and to not be as maybe in your face as maybe the reality might have been. So no, I think that that's a good way to do it. And I know a friend that has done that as well, and her book came out really, really well. So,
Well, good.
uh,
Yeah.
but you also have another one. You have another one coming out, or
Yeah,
you're
I
writing, or
did.
you're writing now,
Almost.
right?
It's I'm almost ready to send it to editor. My characters decided not to talk to me for a few weeks, which I'm like, would you stop leaving me? Yeah, so nothing like when you're abandoned by the characters to do it. But so yeah, this one's been weird, because I've been handwriting it all, which is interesting,
Oh,
because when I
wow.
was up at the retreat with Richard, Paul Evans and stuff, all of a sudden nothing was coming. I couldn't sit and type, but as soon as I started writing it,
Hmm.
it was coming. So this one's been handwriting. So now I'm having to go in and type it all in.
Oh,
But
wow.
this one is about those earlier years. It's a character from my first book, and we meet him a little bit briefly in there, and get a little hint of his story. But this one is going back and telling his story, and it is about the bullying, and about it's not just about the bullying, but it's about our brother's love for us, our Father in heaven, and our brother Jesus Christ, and how we know we're loved. Even that, because that's what I learned a lot from those bullying years, is that I had to remember who really did love me.
Mm-hmm.
and that heavenly love, and remembering that I'm a child of God. One of my friends, well, he was his friend, but he was also one of my Sunday school teachers and stuff at that time. He was younger, but he just found me one day and slipped a note into something. It's like, you're a child of God, and just reminded me of that simple truth. And so this book is kind of centered around that idea of that. So we've got bullying, we've got the other things that we go through in life that make us doubt who we are, and remind us that there's someone who loves us no matter what else is going on. There is that love and that certainty in our lives. And so this one will be an extension of that certainty into that realm of how we're loved
Oh,
and stuff. So
well, that's beautiful. Well, I will look forward to that one coming out too. So, all right. Okay, one of the other things that we focus on here is finding beauty in the broken, because I believe that even in the worst of circumstances, that there's something, maybe we can't see it at the time, but we can look back and we can say, this good thing came out of that, or I learned this during that time. Can you, whether it's the bullying experience or the losses, can you find something that you can share with our listeners to just help them to find beauty in their broken situations?
so I think the biggest thing that I found was the faith that I had, that beauty in knowing who I am and recognizing who I could turn to no matter what. I started to learn to see the beauty in God's hand in those little things every day, and stop and recognize, okay, this is all going on, but He gave me this. He gave me a beautiful sunset. He gave me a friend who just stopped by and said this. He gave me a beautiful husband and family that I could turn to. He gave my parents who taught me to serve others when I was struggling, go out and help someone else. Um, and looking back, I can now see in the midst of all that bullying and all those things that there were those little things. Sometimes when we're in the moment, we can't see it and recognize
Right.
it
Yeah.
sometimes, but when we look back, we go, oh, there was this moment. Oh, wow, there was this time. And I've, especially writing the books has helped a lot with that too, is to look back and go, where were those moments? And trying to train myself to see them now as I'm going, instead of getting lost in all of it. Like, okay, stop, breathe. Your child loves you. Your child's doing this great thing. You've got this, you've got a home and, a husband to turn to. You've got, a friend over here. You've got these little things that you'd never think about, can be so small, but can be everything with it. I think one of the best things that ever happened was, just someone who smiled at me once, never said anything, never did, but just that smile, recognizing me and giving him a smile that day meant the world, and can change a life so much. So I think those are the biggest things. It's like I've learned to recognize and see those small things and appreciate them in a way that I never would have if I hadn't gone through these things.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And that's one thing that I'm hoping to achieve with this podcast, because you mentioned it, that yes, a lot of times we don't recognize it when we're going through it, but you're trying to train yourself to do that now. And I think that if we started learning how to do that, if we learn that there is beauty in broken situations, that maybe we can try to train ourselves to recognize just those small things, like that smile. I remember one time I went to do a curbside pickup order, and the young man who was putting my groceries in my car for me, he had this scowl on his face. He looked miserable. And I don't remember what I said to him, but I just felt like I needed to say something nice or kind to him. And when I did, that scowl went from a smile, an ear to ear smile. And I have no idea. I have no way of knowing what may have happened the rest of the day, but I know he left my car with a smile on his face that he
Right.
didn't have when he arrived. And it's just the power of of one smile or one kind word that you could say or do to, you just don't know how it's going to impact somebody's life. So,
Absolutely. I mean, when you see those videos on Facebook and other social media now too, where like they show that chain, like one person did one thing and then all of a sudden it could lead to this and you don't know
yeah.
if that's actually going to happen, but the thought that it could, the
Mm-hmm.
potential of making that difference, and it doesn't even have to be just right then. It could be long term that someone like I am now remembering back 30 years, 40 years to that one person, to that teacher, to that moment, the difference and the impact that we can make. Again, that we never know,
Right.
but
You
we do
never
it
know.
because it's the right thing, or we recognize it and then hopefully turn it into something good ourselves.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. That is beautiful. And with that, do you have any, even though that was wonderful, but would you have any last warrior words, words of advice to offer anybody who may be listening to this episode or
Keep
watching it?
remembering, yeah, right? Keep remembering who you are, that you are loved, that you're cared for, and to hold on to that and to hold on to the truths in your life that keep you going. And yeah, find those moments.
All right, amen to that. And last but not least, where can people find Certainty, and where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
You can go to my website, tanyaharrisroundy.com, and you can purchase it there, Amazon. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram, Tanya Harris Roundy author. And I'm several book signings and things across Utah, but you can also find my stuff online as well. So
Excellent. And I'll make sure that we have a link to the book and your website and your social media, all your social media places in the show notes so people can just easily click. So,
yay. Yay,
oh,
technology.
yes, it's awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Tanya.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate your time and your story and your willingness to just come on and share your life with all the listeners here. So thank
And
you.
thank you for having those of us on and sharing our stories so that we can help others. We appreciate that.
All right. Thank
Love your work.
you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Tanya's story showed us that not all trauma is intense. They remind us that we all experience traumas, some big, some small, some intense, and others that are just part of everyday living. There were two parts of her overall life story that stood out to me. The first was discovering beauty in the little things. It may have seemed like a casual mention at first, but as I pointed out, it struck me that she was able to see these little things while looking back, but now is training herself to see them in the moment. What a valuable lesson learned that she can take into her own future and impart, as she did here, to others. As you look back on your own traumas, can you find the little things? Can you train your mind to look for things while you're going through something difficult, like actually in the moment? The other part that struck me was the story of her teacher, the one who made a difference in her life, Mr. Johnson. This man showed kindness to a struggling student and encouraged her to get involved in activities that ended up having a direct impact on her future. Tanya is a teacher who now writes and is still active in the theater. Now, there's no way to, for us to know, but I wonder how many other students' lives did Mr. Johnson impact? Tanya and I chatted a bit after I hit the turned off the recording button, and I asked her a little more about Mr. Johnson. She shared with me that he showed up out of the blue at a play she recently directed. Wow, that just, wow. What a legacy that man is leaving for so many people. And so I ask you, who is a Mr. Johnson in your life? Or maybe a better question would be, how can you be a Mr. Johnson in someone else's life? Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.